There's something very strange that has been happening next door. I live in an apartment building, and things have been getting weird. I came home one night recently at about midnight, and as I was walking down the communal hall, I noticed that there was something orange outside my neighbor's door. I had just come back home from having a couple of beers with some friends, so I didn't hesitate to stop and make a closer inspection. I guess I'm a nosy guy when I'm drunk. The orange object appeared to be some kind of voodoo doll. It didn't look like someone had dropped it there as they were walking down the hall. It looked to me as if it had been deliberately placed there. It was roughly 5 centimeters directly in front of my neighbor's door. It was lying on its front, with the top of its head facing the door, and its limbs outstretched. One other thing I noticed was that the twine or string wrapped around its head had come away. It had this string wrapped around all over its body. It looked very out of place and just very odd. Well, even though I had a few beers on board, I knew that that weird twine doll wasn't there when I headed out at 7:30 p.m. Seeing that orange doll wrapped in string seemed to awaken a memory in me because I realized that this wasn't the first time I had seen something kind of weird in front of my neighbor's apartment. I just didn't make the connection until that night. I'll give you a quick rundown of some of the things I've seen out there. Dead beetles, like almost every day. But I never really paid much attention to it since we live out in the sticks. There's bugs everywhere. There was also something that either looked like mud or feces outside his door. And on another occasion, there was something wrapped in a grey cloth inside of a plastic carrier bag. It was weird, but it wasn't really my problem. I just went on my way and into my apartment. A few days turned to weeks, and I noticed that there were no other weird items left outside my neighbor's apartment door. I listened out and always watched my neighbor's door whenever I passed by. But 3 months went by and I didn't hear any form of noise coming from inside his apartment. I stopped another resident to ask about him when I had the opportunity, and he told me that he heard my neighbor had passed away, but the truth was unknown, and it still is unknown, I guess. Later, a cleaning company came, and they went into the apartment next door and started work there. What work they did was unknown to me at the time. It seemed like the guy who lived next door was not coming back. Maybe the rumors were true. Maybe he had passed away, I thought. It wasn't until a little later when I ran into another neighbor that I heard more about what happened to my neighbor and his apartment. Although it's not really a satisfactory conclusion, it was certainly eye-opening to me. A resident who lived a little down the hall watched the cleaning crew enter my neighbor's apartment and spoke to one of the workers. Apparently, every hole, crack, or crevice in that apartment had been completely covered by thick electrical tape. It was as if my neighbor was trying to make his home completely airtight. There was tape all over the ventilation fans, the windows, the drains, the doors. It was everywhere. Due to the fresh air being unable to enter the apartment, the cleaning crew said that the place was full of black mold. It must have smelled terrible in there. If the rumors are true, then maybe that's where they found his body. I couldn't get any clarification on that, though. One thing seemed abundantly clear to me, though. My neighbor was desperate to keep something out of his apartment, and I can't help but think that the strange objects that were being left on the other side of his door had something to do with it, especially that voodoo-looking doll.
I have had some pretty creepy experiences in my life. A lot of them live with me and re-emerge when the lights are out. By that, I mean I'm essentially haunted by their memory. One in particular stands out for me. I remember being home alone and hearing a woman's voice. I couldn't really make out what she was saying. She was mumbling and sobbing. That was really scary. I just ran straight out of the house. On another occasion, I was home alone, and the door to the living room slowly creaked open by itself. I instantly got to my feet and went to see who was there. But of course, no one was there. I don't know if I am susceptible to the paranormal or anything, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't a believer. But talking about the paranormal isn't why I'm here today. I want to share with you the scariest experience I have ever had, and it happened when I moved into an apartment to live alone for the first time in my life. This happened 3 years ago. I had just moved in. Picture a room with just the bare bones, furniture, and lots of cardboard boxes. I remember being way too tired to unpack any of those boxes, so I thought I would unpack the following morning. After I'd positioned my armchair at a perfect angle for the TV, I collapsed into it and relaxed. I must have been dozing while I was sat in it for a while, but then I was awoken by a strange noise. I heard laughter coming from the opposite side of the living room wall. Well, as far as I'm aware, I only heard it the once, so I kind of chalked it up to me being half asleep. I didn't make a big deal out of it. I got up and then went to bed. In the morning, as I was making myself some breakfast, I heard another noise coming from the wall opposite my new living room. It was that laughter again. A weird thought came to mind. I wonder if the person next door is laughing at me. I need to give you a little more context here, I think. Now, when you think of a laugh, you think of those sitcom laughs, I guess. You know, a live audience. What I mean is a laugh when something is funny. The laugh I heard was not someone laughing at a TV show. To me, it was someone laughing in a deliberate, strange manner. I don't know, like the Joker or something. It creeped me out a bit. I hadn't introduced myself to my neighbors yet, and as it is a custom here in Japan when someone moves in, I figured now was a good time to do so. I mean, at least I knew the guy next door was home. I was sure it was a guy based on his laugh. So I went outside and pushed the doorbell for the next door. I waited a couple of moments, but no one came to the door. Just as I was about to give up and go back inside, one of the other neighbors came out of their apartment. He looked like he was heading off to work. "No one has lived there for a long time," he said to me. Well, as you can imagine, that was pretty strange to hear, since I just heard someone laugh next door. I introduced myself and kept the laughter I'd heard to myself. I ended up thinking that it was just another encounter with the paranormal. Great. Trust me to live next door to a haunted apartment, I thought. Normally, I would have freaked and wanted to move out straight away, but since I had previous history with ghosts, I thought I would stick it out. Nothing much else happened, besides hearing a little bit of strange laughter now and then over the course of the following days. Who cares about a little laughter anyways, I told myself. 3 months went by pretty quickly in the new place, and despite hearing a man laughing every now and then next door, it was pretty much plain sailing. But just after that 3-month period, I heard a new noise coming from next door. There was a new, strange clanking sound coming from the walls. Once again, it was the living room wall. Well, the laughter was one thing, but now a strange clanking, banging sound. That's a little too much. I thought about moving, but if I'm completely honest, I was way too lazy to pack everything up and get searching for a new place. I didn't act, I just stalled, and then learned to live with that new noise. Life got in the way. I was out more than I was in anyways. One day, I think it was a Saturday or Sunday, I know it was the weekend, I got so annoyed by those weird noises from next door. I decided to boot the wall at the point I heard them coming from. In my head, it seemed dumb, and I remember clearly thinking to myself, there's no point in kicking the wall because the ghost next door won't care. I kicked it nonetheless, and I wasn't ready for the reaction I got. I heard a very distinct and clear male voice shout, "Whoa!" And then I heard the sound of something crashing. What the hell is going on? I thought. I froze. I didn't expect to provoke a reaction from the spirit next door. Then reality hit me like a truck. Occam's razor. There wasn't a ghost next door. Maybe there was a person in there who'd been living in there without the landlord knowing. Maybe some guy had broken in there and claimed the place as his own. Well, I wasn't going to go and ring the doorbell again, but I knew someone who might. The police. I called the cops and they arrived quite quickly. I heard them try the door and enter, but there was a bit of a commotion next door, a heated exchange. There were screams and shouts. There was someone living next door after all. I found out later that a middle-aged man had been living in there, even though that apartment was supposed to be empty. The man was apparently under the influence of some illicit substances, shall we say, and when the police busted in there, he went on a deranged rampage. He went kicking and screaming. It turned out that he was the landlord's son. His son had troubles with substances, so therefore his dad, the landlord, allowed him to use that apartment to get up to whatever he got up to in there. I was really annoyed that he was allowed to come and go as he pleased in there, while I had to pay and listen to him laugh like a moron. That laugh really creeped me out, but it wasn't a patch on what I realized that clanking sound was. That clanking sound was the sound of him digging a kitchen knife into the drywall that separated our apartments. I was told that there were tons of holes in his side of the wall. It seemed like that maniac was trying to break down the wall and bust into my living room. I moved after that. I got my deposit back and was forgiven a couple of weeks of rent payment. That goes without saying, in my opinion. Although I have had my run-ins with the paranormal, the fear I get when I remember the sound of that madman slashing away at his wall is unmatched. I dread to think what his plan was. Ghosts aren't half as scary as people, if you ask me.
I first met her when I was on my way home from work. I remember that night so clearly. I was crossing the road from the bus stop opposite my building. There was a small park across the road by the bus stop. I had to walk through that to get home. I was living alone at the time this happened. I heard a voice call out to me from behind the phone booth in the park. "There's a full-length mirror in your home, right?" Well, my heart started beating out of my chest. I'm a bit of a jumpy person. I mean, that question was disturbing though, am I wrong? Who asks someone that? I quickly turned around to face the direction of the person who asked me that question. There was a woman craning her head from behind the phone booth. She was dressed in dark colors. Was it beige or black? I can't remember. She was stood there kind of hunched over. I hadn't ever seen that woman before. I would say that she was in her 40s at a guess. To me, she was a total stranger. Without skipping a beat, the woman went on with her line of questioning. "There's a full-length mirror in your home, right? It's about this big, isn't it?" As she said that, she began to mime a long rectangle shape with her fingers. "You should get rid of that mirror. Throw it away. It's bad. Bad things can happen. Is it a memory? Can't help it if it's a memory." I realized that that woman was crazy. I stood my ground and thought I would come back to her with a firm tone. "No, there's nothing like that. Don't worry. I better be going now," I said as I left. I started to quickly walk back to my apartment, but I heard footfall coming from behind me. It was as if that woman didn't hear a word I said. She just kept prattling on to me. I know. I live next door. Next door. Hey, just throw it away. Is it a memory? Be a shame if it was a memento, but that can't be helped though. You should throw it away tomorrow." At that point, I thought the best thing I could do would be to just ignore her. I could see that this conversation was going nowhere. I thought she would get tired and leave me alone. However, my plan didn't exactly work out. She followed me into my building. We had a communal area, which wasn't behind a security door, so anyone could walk on in. So that's what she did. She followed me in, and she waited with me while I called the elevator. I mean, there was a chance that she could have been my neighbor, I thought. I didn't really run into my neighbors all that much. She kept going on and on in these nonsensical circles. I couldn't stand listening to her anymore, so I said, "That's enough. I don't have a full-length mirror." I raised my voice. I was getting really annoyed. "Don't lie. You already know it. Your education is bad. There is a full-length mirror in your room. About this big, isn't it?" she said, as she began to mime a long rectangle shape again with her fingers. She followed me into the elevator at the last second. Had I known that she would have joined me in the elevator, then there would have been no chance that I would have taken it. I would have taken the stairs. I wanted nothing but to be away from this rambling maniac. She kept saying the dumb same phrases and miming that long mirror shape with her hands. It was like it was a spell or something. The elevator took us to the 7th floor, my floor, and as soon as the doors opened, I ran to apartment 708, which was my apartment. I scrambled to unlock the door, expecting that crazy woman to chase after me. But she didn't. She stood by the elevator and shouted, "Throw away the full-length mirror. Is it a memory?" I calmed down a little after I was behind a locked door. That woman shook me up. I found myself trying to dissect the meaning of her strange words as I lay in bed that night. I couldn't make head or tail of it. It made no sense. By the way, not like it matters at all, but I was a 25-year-old woman living alone when this happened. So if some of you reading this are thinking that you wouldn't be shaken up by what happened, try to empathize with me and remember that that woman was a complete stranger to me. Come the morning, I couldn't get her words out of my head. I guess that was due to the rough night of sleep that I had had. I went to work feeling so tired and groggy. My coworkers teased me that day, asking if I had a hangover. When the day was done and I was approaching my building, I cringed at the sight of that creepy middle-aged woman dressed in either beige or black waiting for me. I knew what was coming before she opened her mouth, a repeat of yesterday's ramblings. "There's a full-length mirror in your home, right? It's about as big as this, isn't it?" As she said that, she began to mime a long rectangle shape with her fingers once again. "Is it a memory? Is it a memory?" I decided to ignore her again. I mean, what else could I have done in that situation? I got in the elevator, and so did she. I couldn't stop her, because she had said she lived here. Only this time when I got out of the elevator on my floor, she followed me right up to my door. I did not like that one bit, so I spun around to give her a piece of my mind. "Listen, lady, if you keep this up, then I'm gonna go to the police, okay?" And then, quick as a flash, as if she didn't hear, she continued with her ramblings. "I live next door. Let me in and I'll show you. I will help you throw it away. It can't be helped if it's just a memory." I was sleep deprived and severely irritated, and this crazy neighbor had just gotten on my last remaining nerve, so I let her have it. "What the hell are you talking about? What is in my apartment is nothing to do with you." I screamed at her, and I didn't care who heard me. The strange woman then said, in an exceptionally calm manner, despite the rage I had just thrown her way, "A mirror is, well, it doesn't just reflect light, does it? It also reflects bad energy, an evil spirit passing from your home into mine. It's reflected in the full-length mirror, and it comes into my home." I had had enough. I asked her with a smile on my face, "Are you actually crazy?" "Look, Markun got into an incident, you see, and Markun is currently in the hospital. If this carries on, then Markun will die, right? So that full-length mirror in your home, please throw it away. Is it a memory?" I gave up. What was the point in wasting my time speaking to this maniac? I opened my door really forcefully, entered, slammed it shut, and locked it. There was no point talking to that woman. While I was in my home, I heard that woman still going on and on out there. "Is it a memory? Still, it can't be helped, can it? The full-length mirror, it's about this big, isn't it?" I turned on the lights in my apartment and I went to contact the landlord. I said that I'd been having some trouble with my neighbor and I wanted it resolved immediately. I said it in a bit of a panic, I guess, because I was all worked up, The adrenaline was pumping. If that crazy lady kept pushing me, then I didn't want to be responsible for my actions. The landlord listened to me, but didn't seem as interested as I would have expected him to be. Then, suddenly, my doorbell started ringing. So I started saying to the landlord, "Listen, that's her. That's that crazy lady who lives next door. You gotta do something about her. I'm losing my mind over here." And the landlord then replied with a lazy, "Uh-huh." I could barely hear him over the doorbell. I thought I heard a man's voice outside my apartment too for a moment. "Listen, if you're talking about apartment 707, no one lives there. We used to have a guy who lived there. Yeah, but he died in the end. Now some cell phone company rents it, and they just use it for storage. Guy called Ma Kun or something. He was in there before, but trust me, nobody's in there now. So I don't know. Call the police or something, 'cause that ain't my tenant." I hung up and I felt completely shocked and alone. The woman outside kept talking about the mirror, and kept asking me if it was a memory or not, and I didn't know what to do. That Ma Kun she mentioned before was real, but that mirror wasn't. Well, as far as I know. I knew what I had in my apartment, and I knew there wasn't a full-length mirror. I ended up calling the police once I pulled myself together, and I'm not sure if they caught that woman or not, because technically no crime was committed according to them. I mean, I felt as if she was stalking me, but apparently that wasn't the case. I did the best thing I could do for my mental health, and I moved at the first chance I got. The next place I moved to wasn't half as nice, but at least I never encountered a fake neighbor as weird as that lady was. I really wanted to make sense of the words she was saying to me. I remember them verbatim. Is it a memory? What does that mean? I have no clue. I wonder if she's bothering the next tenant. On a side note, I guess. Ever since I had that unpleasant encounter, I don't like full-length mirrors that are about as big as this, and I don't wish to own one. I don't know why. Maybe I just want to be on the safe side. I don't want to end up like Markun, I guess.
This happened when I was in the 2nd grade. I felt sick in the morning, but I wanted to go to school that day. I managed the first period okay, but then I was sent home because I was running a high fever. Luckily, we lived on the same street as the school, so instead of getting my parents out of work to come and pick me up, I just walked home. It was fine to walk home alone for me. I didn't ever worry. It was only a short walk. I let myself in and went straight to my bedroom. I got into bed and fell asleep before I knew it. I was sleeping soundly, I guess, but then I was awoken by a noise from downstairs. I honestly just thought it was my mom coming back from her part-time job, or from shopping, or whatever. The school probably called her. Since she woke me up, I figured that I might as well go downstairs to go and see her. I crept down the stairs quietly. I felt like surprising her that day. I likely had a smile on my face as I slowly went downstairs. However, that smile would soon disappear when I realized that my mom wasn't down there. Someone else was. It was our neighbor, a guy of about 50 years old. He lived next door. I stopped and stared at him. He had a knife in his hand. Seeing me at home, he panicked. Now, I am old enough to know that he didn't expect company. He would have assumed that the house would have been empty, or, I dread to think, my mom would have been home alone. Before I could begin to process what I was seeing and begin to question what was happening, he spoke to me. "Hey, can you keep a secret? No one needs to know that I was here, okay, pal?" My eyes were glued to the knife in his hand the whole time he was speaking. My brain was now in gear. Remember, I had just woken up and I had a fever. Now I was beginning to put 2 and 2 together. Well, trying as best as I could. I was only a kid when this happened. I stared at that knife and I just thought to myself, I am in danger. I was so scared when the gravity of the situation set in that all I could do was nod yes. He smiled at me when I nodded, and then to my surprise, he turned and left. I ran over to the door and locked it. I guess I must have forgotten to lock it when I got home from school. I wanted to tell my parents, but the thought that my neighbor might kill me if I told them. He scared me so much with that knife he had in his hand that there was no way I could break the promise I had with him. I had to keep the promise. So I didn't say anything to my parents. About a month went by and life was kind of back to normal. I thought about the neighbor often, and I didn't like being home alone after school, waiting for my parents to come home. But I was surviving. One afternoon after school, I heard a knock at the door. I went to the door, and it was the old man next door stood out there. He had a load of sweets, and he wanted to give them to me. I was so stupid to open the door while I was home alone after what had happened. I know that now, by the way. I reluctantly accepted them and closed the door. He would run into me or come to the house once a month to give me some candy after that. He always smiled and said, "Here you go, eat these." I didn't understand at the time why he was bringing me those sweets, but I guess it could have been to try to bribe my silence. I'm not sure, but I think that's what it was. I didn't like being rewarded for a reason I didn't understand. It felt wrong and a bit gross. I didn't like to see him smiling at me holding the candy. I could always picture him holding that knife instead. One time he came over with his candy while my mom was home, and my mom made excuses for me saying, "Oh, he's just shy," and stuff like that when I didn't want to talk to him or make eye contact. My mom would laugh as she said that, finding my shyness cute, I guess. She didn't know the secret I was keeping for him. Months and months went by, and then I heard the news that the creepy old neighbor of ours had passed away. It was like a weight had been lifted off of me. My parents thought that I would have been in bits, because to them, it looked like the old man and I had a deep connection. Inside, I was celebrating, not mourning. I didn't shed a tear for that man. Life moved on after that. I grew up, moved away, and began a life of my own. I've always been a little edgy about being the only one at home, but over the years it's gotten easier. I went back to my hometown last weekend and was reminded of our neighbor. I was at some neighborhood party with my parents. Someone mentioned him and I listened in. That old guy, he loved betting on horses and playing the slots. Another person said, "Yeah, I just remember him being an alcoholic. He used to turn up to our house uninvited all the time, and I had to have strong words with him once to get him to go away." And another neighbor chimed in with, "Don't you think it's funny that all the thefts in the neighborhood went away after he passed on?" That's when it dawned on me. He was there that day to rob us, and possibly more than that. Had my mother been home alone, which was very likely because she worked part-time, things might have gone very differently. So he was bribing me with sweets to keep his secret. He was going to rob us at the bare minimum. He was an alcoholic thief who preyed on our neighborhood. I can still see his face and the knife in his hand. It is a pretty traumatic memory for me.
This is something that happened a few years ago that really stressed me out. I'm a guy and I was in my 20s and living home alone at the time. My next door neighbor was an older guy who was probably in his 40s. He was also living alone. On the night that this experience took place, I got home from work at about 11 p.m. As I was walking down the hall to my apartment, I heard a loud scream coming from my neighbor's apartment. That scream was undoubtedly a woman's scream. I stopped in place a little ways from his apartment. I listened for a while. It didn't sound like a scream of pain, it sounded like one of anger. Then I could hear muffled syllables of words, but I couldn't make out what was being said. It sounded like the guy next door was having an argument. Well, he didn't seem to be doing all that much arguing. I didn't know he had a girlfriend. He was a pretty serious guy, kind of rigid, you know. I guess if he had a girlfriend, I could see her arguing with him. Oh well, not my issue, I thought, as I walked into my apartment. While I was in my kitchen, heating up my dinner, I heard the woman next door laughing. "Oh, you guys made up, huh?" She was certainly a loud lady. Again, not my issue, I thought as I ate. After a little while, I heard the woman shouting, only this time it sounded like she had pressed her body to the wall that joins my apartment to his, and she was very audible. "Hello, hello, I'm coming to see you soon." I found that very weird, so I couldn't help but pay attention to her voice. I noticed that the old man wasn't saying anything. It was a little suspicious now. What the hell was going on next door? I stood still in my kitchen, on edge. I had the feeling that something was about to happen. And then something did happen. There was a knock at my door. I went and put my eye to the peephole, and there was a woman I hadn't met before stood out there. I guess that she must have heard me coming because she spoke to me through the closed door. "Hi, please can I use your phone? The phone next door is broken." This was very unusual, but since I was on good terms with the man next door, I felt as if I couldn't refuse. I mean, what if the quarrel they had next door had escalated somehow? What if my neighbor was hurt? I didn't want to take that risk, so I went against the uneasy gut feeling I had about that woman, and I opened the door. As soon as I opened the door, I regretted it. A woman in her 40s began shouting at me. She was all worked up and seemed to be incredibly anxious. She was shouting for help and saying something about being killed or killing. She wasn't making a great deal of sense. She had become so escalated. It was really stressful as she was being so animated. I understood that she wanted to use my phone to call the police, so I showed her to my house phone. I told her to wait there a while whilst I went to check on my neighbor. His door was open ajar. I had never been in his apartment before, and I was shocked by what I saw. Everything was turned over and upside down. It looked an absolute mess. I wasn't sure if this was usual for him or if it was because there had been a struggle next door. Had his fight with the woman alone in my apartment gotten physical? I called out my neighbor's name from the doorway, but no one responded. I decided that time was of the essence, so I entered his apartment. I looked in each room for him, but he was nowhere to be found. I heard a robotic kind of beeping noise and then quickly realized what that noise meant. It was the noise the phone makes when it's not placed back in the receiver. I went over to his phone and I put it back on the hook. I then realized that the woman who was alone in my apartment had lied to me. His phone wasn't broken. I cursed myself for leaving her alone in there, as I now thought that she was ransacking my apartment just like she had done to my neighbor. I raced back to my apartment and I went straight in. I looked everywhere for that woman. I was ready to throw her out, but I wasn't shocked to realize that she had already gone. Thankfully, nothing in my apartment had been stolen. I guessed that she wasn't a thief. I decided to lock the door and not inform the cops. It was clear to me at the time that my neighbor and his girlfriend had had a lover's tiff, and I was way too tired to be filling in forms all night with the police. I just wanted to unwind. I got ready for bed after a little gaming, but for some reason, when I was lying down on my bed, I couldn't seem to sleep. When I did nod off, I woke myself up again. I knew tomorrow at work would be rough due to the amount of times I randomly woke up. Something didn't quite feel right that night. At one point, I was just staring blankly at the ceiling. and it was at that point that I sensed something. I had that horrible feeling that I was being watched. I turned my head to the left, and my eyes were naturally drawn to the closet. Did I check there? I tried to focus my vision on the slightly open door. I jumped out of bed instantly, because I felt for sure that I had just came eye to eye with someone. There were eyes peering out of my closet. Did our eyes meet? I wondered for a split second, and then from the darkness of my closet, I heard a soft chuckle transform into a cackle. There was a woman in my closet. The woman from before. She didn't leave. She just hid. I launched myself to my feet, screaming most likely as I did. I ran out of my apartment. I was just wearing a t-shirt and some shorts. I ran and I hid in an all-night laundromat. When the sun came up, I timidly returned to my apartment. I planned to call the police when I got in, but when I climbed the steps to my floor, I noticed that they were already there. Apparently my neighbour was the one who had called the police. I told him about what happened and I said that my place hadn't been robbed. He didn't say much. He just seemed to look so embarrassed. My neighbour came round later that afternoon with a gift certificate and an apology. He didn't tell me who she was or why she did the things that she did. I just ended up feeling so awkward about it I couldn't bring myself to ask more questions. I still live next door to that guy, and there hasn't been another incident like that one. Well, as far as I know, there hasn't been. By the way, my apartment had been ransacked by the time I came back in the morning. Things were all in disarray, but nothing was stolen. It just looked a mess. One odd thing though. For some reason, my phone was left off the hook.